According to a study by Michael Freeman, entrepreneurs are 50% more likely to report having a mental health condition. Founders are also twice more likely to suffer from depression, 3 times more likely to suffer from substance abuse, 6 times more likely to suffer from ADHD, and 10 times more likely to suffer from bipolar disorder. In some extreme cases, founders and CEOs have lost their lives due to the unrelenting pressure to succeed. I caught up with Bonobos co-founder Andy Dunn, who shared how his bipolar disorder derailed both his personal and his professional life. Creating real systemic change is a continuous journey that requires us to always keep taking steps forward, no matter how big or how small. This is the work in progress.
Bipolar disorder is a mood disorder. It means that your highs can be too high and your lows can be kind of catatonically low. I hid this journey, which included, 2 or 3 manic episodes, which is psychosis, picture literally the person quote unquote going crazy, and then a lot of depression, acute depression, can't get out of bed, suicidal ideation, all of that. And it too often intersects with being an entrepreneur.
I have a quote of yours that I want to read. You don't want to let your team down. You don't want to let your customers down. You don't want to let your investors down. You don't want to let your family down. You don't want to let yourself down. That's a lot of weight. But I also think the opposite is true.
Yeah.
By disclosure, you're actually like freeing those individuals from I thought something was going on, or freeing it for themselves to face their own circumstances. Tell me about this quote.
Well, it's funny what you say about that. So I sat down with a number of people who I'm pretty close to as I was writing the book, who I never talked to about this. And I thought it would be this momentous occasion. And I remember telling a friend of mine in New York, his name's Jason, we went to Stanford together. And he and I knew each other and have for 16 years. And we're really close friends. And in New York, together socially, he followed the journey of Bonobos from a business standpoint. And I sat down and told him, and I thought it was this big moment, and he was like, uh-huh. He was like 0.0% surprised. And I think that's one of the things about us is people know us. They kind of, other people know us frequently better than we know ourselves. And so it's not a big deal to tell someone who loves you about what you're dealing with. They're not going to be surprised, right, when it comes to mental health. They kind of already know. It just gives it a name, and it gives you kind of permission to have a friend support system too, which we all need.
There was a comedian I watched recently who said she told her best friend about her mental disorder, and he goes, it's kind of like a middle name. I knew you had one, but I didn't know what it was. Exactly. And I was like, that's such a great way of putting it, because we all have, like you said, we all have some form of dysfunction in a way. Now, okay, so let's take this into the workplace. You as a leader, right? 5 years is still relatively new, right? And how does that affect your approach to leadership? I'll give you a little anecdote. I started therapy a couple months ago, again, and my insurance, for instance, wouldn't cover telehealth visits, but they would cover in-person visits. I was like, it's a pandemic, I can't go. The additional stressor was me on the phone with the insurance company and then trying to fit and do I want to pay extra money just to pay out of pocket, and going through all that decision-making process, or having a batch of employees that may need, mental health services. How has that affected your approach to leadership?
So how do we create norms of disclosure? I think that's step one. The second step is community. Right? So we have these ERGs in this day and age, employee resource groups, whether we call it that or not, around so many other elements of the journey towards true inclusivity, right? We have it around folks who are queer. We have it around all kinds of different folks from a racial standpoint. It's not to say that those things are going well. There's so much more we need to do, but mental illness is the same thing, right? And I think it's only a very progressive organization that lets people gather or invites other people in who are curious around the issue of mental health. And then I think the third thing is the treatment, helping facilitate treatment for these illnesses. And that requires money. That requires actually putting money in, and that fundamentally, from my vantage point, has to be a mental health insurance system that we build. So we have regular insurance, which is really primarily oriented towards physical, medical health. Right. And then in some companies, we have dental and vision. Let's take care of our eyes and our teeth. But there's something cool behind our eyes and our teeth, which is our brain, which is kind of important to who we are, that we don't actually we don't pay for mental health, we don't invest in that. And so I think we need to re-examine that these reimbursement rates, it's pathetic.
Why did you feel the responsibility to put it into a book, like your personal story into a book?
So I was in college, and I was in an environment where you're kind of having drinks on the floor of a fraternity that I was in, and it was the norm, to be drinking. And this colleague, classmate of ours, looked at me and said, "Do you ever know what it feels like to just feel nothing, over a beverage?" And I didn't know what to say because I hadn't yet experienced depression at that point in my life. And within 2 or 3 years out of college, he killed himself. He ended his own life. And that conversation haunted me because I realized that when we name our depression, we are making fundamentally a bid. And I think the ultimate bid for the most acute form of mental illness, which is the manifestation of it, which is suicide, is a very important bid to make. And so if you think about it, if the number one killer of young people is suicide, and we create a norm where you can't talk about those thoughts, that's a problem.
So what advice do you give other leaders of organizations and or employees just around, destigmatizing this, normalizing it, and what do we have left to do? Like, I'm sure we're only at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to change the culture by disclosing your own struggle or journey as a leader. So, okay, some people deal with an actual diagnosed mental illness. Some people deal with something that maybe that you haven't figured out if that part of it is like important, just kind of like the human struggle. Some of it doesn't take a name. And then the other group are still human beings too, right? We all struggle with something, which is why it's so connecting when we can be vulnerable, not just with friends and family and loved ones, which hopefully is step one, but in the workplace too. Yeah. And so at some point as a leader, I think you have to role model, whether it's setting up some kind of a fireside chat like this with somebody else asking you, the right questions, whether it's finding some other way to communicate it, whatever you're comfortable with.
What advice do you give people who are on the receiving end of the information of a friend or loved one who's going through a difficult time?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to assume is that just because you're not a mental health professional doesn't mean that you can't provide a great service to the person who's talking to you. And it's actually easy and it's free, which is just shut up and listen. Just listen and be open, have your posture be open, be accepting, give the facial recognition that they're not telling you something awful. But I think we need to, when someone's telling us something, be open and receiving, and then it's kind of the hug afterwards. You don't even have to know anything about it, but just to accept it. And then I do think there's a second step, which is to help that person get or find the help that they need. And that might require some proactive energy because frequently people don't want to.
I mean, in the business world, of TED Talks and speeches and online content and thought leadership, we put individuals on pedestals and we see that, oh, they're okay. I'm not good for them. Sucks for me. And, it's simply just not the case, right? We see the best of people when we see them publicly. Even if you're inside of an organization and you see your CEO walking down the hallway, you're seeing them in one light. And I think as we become more of a multi-dimensional business society, all these other nuances become okay to be discussed and addressed and, embraced. I think a lot of business leaders still hide their mental health issues because it's still a taboo topic in society. And I think the one way to do away with taboo is to keep punching away at it. Every little drip, every little conversation, every mention counts. And there's still this stigma around what leadership is supposed to look like. And as we've learned from this interview, it doesn't look like that often, if at all. And that's okay.